Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Chafee, your district governor for Rotary year 2022-23. Glad that you could join us today. A couple of housekeeping things. This session is going to be recorded. So if you take a look at your screen, it will tell you how to cloak your identity if need be. This is our first noon Zoom for the year, and so we're happy that you're with us. We've got a great program today. There we go. Got a great program for you today. There are 4 more Zooms coming up, so I'm going to flash the schedule right there for you. It'll be at the end of the program too, and it'll be in the bridge going forward, so don't think that you have to take a picture of that screen, but we got some great programs lined up. Continuing with past District Governor David's noon Zooms, we think it's a great idea to help educate all of our folks. So World Polio Day is coming up on October the 24th. To register your club's events or activities, please go to www.endpolio.org. I'm going to monitor that. So if you're doing a special fundraiser or activity or community awareness, I'd love to hear about it. So register those events, please. Also, if you'd like to receive the Rotary Polio newsletter, you can subscribe to this free publication by logging in to your My Rotary account. And under news and media alerts, I think it's highlighted over there on the right-hand side, drop down to publications. And there's probably 15 or 20 different newsletters that Rotary does. Feel free to subscribe to the ones that interest you. And the last piece of little housekeeping is hopefully you had an opportunity to open up September's edition of The Bridge. We've done a complete rewrite of that and are very proud on the way it came out. Murtada, our new editor, is on this webinar today. So Murtada, great job. Looking forward to see how we're going to make October shine also. So if you haven't had an opportunity to read that, please do so. And with that, it's my distinct privilege to interview past district governor and district Rotary Foundation chair, David Elliott.
Thank you, District Governor Michael, and welcome everybody to this very, very important noon Zoom. Just waiting for a little technical thing. Here we are. I can get started. Incredible when we look back at the impact our district has had on polio eradication. Since 2019, Rotarians in our district have contributed more than $330,000 to help to eliminate polio worldwide. And with the help of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, our match reached almost $1 million, as it was $991,198. So absolutely amazing, and I congratulate everybody for their efforts. Today we have a speaker that is known very well throughout Rotary, maybe not so much in our district, but after today, she will. Ann Lee is from South Berwick, Maine, and has made eradication of polio and the alleviation of suffering by polio survivors her life work. Over the last several years, she has actively participated in 30 national immunization days and organized 26 teams herself, choosing to go to areas where nobody would normally go, such as Chad, Malawi, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Pakistan, all those places that are not necessarily tourist destinations in Egypt and in India, but where the need is the greatest and where the publicity and goodwill surrounding the trip are crucial as immunizations themselves to help communicate the need for eradication. As a global advocate, she has shared her story and passion hundreds of times at numerous zone conferences pets, foundation events, and at the International Assembly in 2017, 2018, 2019, carrying the message of polio eradication around the world and beyond, and raising money and creating new converts to fight. She's determined that no child will needlessly suffer to what she herself, a polio survivor, has been through. Her concern for polio survivors includes working to ensure mobility and dignity for those who survived the disease, but did not have the access to the kind of surgeries and treatments that are available. And she has led Rotary International grants to this end. Ann Lee has put a face on the subject of polio eradication, winning hearts and minds and raising hundreds of thousands of dollars in the process. A polio survivor, the story she tells is personal, and her journey to fight eradicating polio. She has earned International Service Award for Polio Free World, the Rotary Service Award Above Self, and was honored with the White House Champion of Change for her humanitarian and contributions to public service, aimed at improving people's lives and making a better future for everyone around the globe. She was featured in a magazine, Real Simple, in June 2012, and was featured in a video with Bill and Melinda Gates on the Foundation Annual Letter of 2017. Ann Lee is a member of the Rotary Club of Okoneek, I might not got that right, Anne-Marie, you can correct me, in Maine, and served District 7780 in many capacities, including District Governor in 2010 and 2011. As you can tell, she's very busy and very proud of the fact that she's going to be one of those ones that will help us to eradicate polio. But even outside of Rotary, she has served in multiple terms as the trustee of the York Hospital in York, Maine, serving as the vice chair of the trustees board, very active in her hospital's COVID vaccination. She resides in South Berwick, Maine, USA, with her devoted yellow lab, Parker, and 3 years cat, Elliot. Great last name. She's a member of the Paul Harris Society, a foundation major donor, and bequests. So members of District 6330, a warm welcome for Ann Lee.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be with you and everyone else. Even though I can't see you all, I hope I'm looking okay. So first of all, I have to warn you that I have construction going on at my house, which is why I'm sitting in this particular area. And if there happens to be a loud noise, my dog Parker will join in the conversation. So just be prepared if it should happen. That's all I can't stop it. So maybe she'll join us, maybe she won't. I do want to share with you today my story with polio, because in a lot of ways it tells the history. It really does tell the history of polio, especially here in the United States and around the globe for some of the countries that I visited. I contracted polio in 1955 here in the United States, right here in the state of Maine, where I live today. And it was one of the hottest summers on record. Temperatures topped 100, which only happened this past summer. But at that time, Boston was suffering one of the worst polio epidemics that it ever faced. And because of the fear of polio attacking their children, families left the cities and they traveled to the more rural areas and helped to bring the epidemic to my home state of Maine. Before the year 1955 would come to a close, 28,985 children and adults in the US would contract polio, and I was one of them. Just 3 months after the vaccine announcement, my journey with polio began at the tender age of 17 months here in South Berwick, Maine. I'm the youngest of 5. I was the only child obviously affected. Now, my mother instantly recognized that I had polio. I began to stumble as a little toddler, and I had a burning fever, and I was taken to the hospital. Unfortunately, my mom had already lived through such a frightening experience because she watched her younger brother, Marlon, contract polio when he was just 5 years old. Initially, I spent several months in the hospital. I was paralyzed from the waist down, but much of that paralysis disappeared when the fever broke. But in its wake, it left damaged nerves that resulted in weak and useless muscles. I cannot imagine how my mother must have felt looking down at her little daughter in her crib, or the agony that my parents endured seeing their child go through years of physical limitations and rehabilitation. And as I travel the globe, I think that same thing every time I see a child with polio is exactly what the mom and the dad are feeling. When I returned home from the hospital, it was my mom who massaged and moved my legs every 3 hours, determined to have her baby girl walk. And I owe so much to my mother. And in many ways, I am who I am today because of her. Now, I cannot recall that frightening experience because my earliest recollections are my many surgeries, my constant physical therapy at a rehab center, and as well as at home, and the many leg braces that I went through. Today, I am able to walk with limitations, although I have residual damage in both legs with daily challenges to face. I am extremely fortunate to be standing here before you. Well, I'm not standing there before you. I'm sitting here before you, but I am very fortunate to be here. When I contracted polio, it was a time when local papers used to list the names of folks who were sick. And my illness was in the Portland, Maine paper, and the Mrs. Woodbury of Brunswick had read about me. Now, Brunswick's about 70 miles north of us. She promptly sat down and wrote a letter to my mom, and thus began a long relationship between the two of them, with me as the main topic. But when I was old enough, I also wrote her letters. And when arthritis crippled her hands, she packed out her letters on an old typewriter. And every time I was in the hospital, I received a postcard daily from Mrs. Woodbury. And on every holiday, whatever the occasion, as well as on my birthday, she used to send me a card. She actually sent me cards for 35 years until her death, even when I was an adult. And all those cards, she tucked $2 in each one of them. It doesn't sound like a lot of money today, but I remember the very first time I visited Mrs. Woodbury at her home, and she and her husband lived simply, not wealthy, but not monetary wise. But Mrs. Woodbury was sure rich in heart. And she's my best example of what living in Maine is all about. My best example of how people in communities everywhere pull together to offer support, even when you're separated by many miles. Mrs. Woodbury taught me the meaning of giving, and more importantly, the art of receiving. And unbeknownst to both of us, she helped to lay the foundation for me to join Rotary. I tell you this story because I want you to never underestimate the impact that you may have on one individual's life through a simple act of kindness. You see, an ordinary life can be extraordinary, and that magic can be found in the everyday. So it seemed only natural that when Rotary initiative to eradicate polio became known to me, I wanted to join. I wanted to find a way to give back and to stop this disease. So I went to India on my very first National Immunization Day trip, and that was in 2001 of January. I witnessed firsthand the devastation that polio was still bringing to the people of India. I saw crawlers, young and old, begging in the streets, dragging themselves by their hands and their arms, their legs twisted in unimaginable contortions. Some actually wore sandals on their hands and their feet, walking on all fours like animals, stripped of their dignity. I was shocked and I was saddened. And I immediately realized that I had a place to play, a position to play in this initiative. I also saw there a little girl at a rehab center who, when she passed by me, reminded myself of her when I was that age. She limped past me. She had the same thin right leg, the same heavy metal brace. And I was instantly overcome with memories of myself. And I cried. I cried really hard for myself. I cried for her, but I cried for all the senseless waste that polio still brings to the world. And even now, there are areas of the world that this is happening. But I need to tell you that because of Rotary and because of my experiences with NIDs, I'm a proud player in the eradication efforts, and I am helping to make history, just as you are every time you make a donation to the Polio Plus program. I want to show you, can I share the screen? Is it possible to share my screen with you folks? Is that possible in a webinar, David?
You should be able to do that.
Thank you. I just want to share with you a few photos so you get an idea of what I'm talking about. And where is it? Share slides. Come on. Here we are. Well, I guess that's not going to happen. Does not want to connect. Let me see. Can you see the screen right now?
Cannot.
Cannot. That's what I was afraid of. And it does not want me to do it.
Okay.
That's too bad. Exactly what I wanted to do. Well, I'm sorry. That's not going to happen in my bailiwick here. My apologies, everyone.
Go ahead and try it one more time.
Well, I have now lost my, wait a minute. I don't even see my share button. I'm sorry. It's gone here.
Okay. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry, because it would have been nicer than having you all look at me. But anyway. Just go back to what we were talking about.
And Lee, we could post the pictures on our Facebook page, on our district Facebook page afterwards, if you like.
I can send you a link. Maybe you can just get it up yourself. Would that work? No? Is that possible?
That's possible.
Forever, though.
Send it to Catherine.
It was easier the first time around. I'm having a terrible time now. I'm sorry, guys. Here we are. Nope, that's not going to work either. I'll send you one later for your Facebook page.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all I can do. I apologize, everyone. I didn't want you to have to go through this whole long talk here, but let me talk to you about the vaccinators. You'll notice that President Jennifer Jones was just in Pakistan, and she highlighted the importance of the women vaccinators. And she couldn't have said that any clearer. I mean, without these women vaccinators, there wouldn't be an NID. There wouldn't be a success with the polio eradication. With every NID, there are tens of thousands of vaccinators. They set out to deliver the vaccine to children, every child under 5 at their doorstep. Many of these children live in some of the most dangerous and remote places on earth, such as the mountains of Afghanistan. But the vaccinators travel to them however they can, on camel, on horseback, by bicycle, in boats. But most of the work for polio eradication is done on foot. And the vaccine travels with them in boxes slung around their shoulders. Each day, their routes take them miles to seek out villages and settlements, and they brave the burning heat of the dry season, the torrential rains of the monsoon. On the high mountains of Pakistan, they face blizzard. And where there is conflict, they often face guns. And as I said, it is the many health workers around the world 80% of whom are women that are the unsung heroes on the polio front. My trips have exposed me to the many needs that exist in developing countries, including thousands of polio survivors and the challenges that they face. And it has led to some projects for mobility. Among those are the gift of tricycle wheelchairs. My teams and I have supported tricycle wheelchair shops in Nigeria through Rotary grants. And although I have presented tricycle wheelchairs to many, that means you sit on the seat and you pedal in order to move, it is always an emotional experience for me. I want you to take just a moment to imagine a woman, and I had a nice photo of her, you'll see it when I put it on your Facebook page. I want you to imagine this woman covered with the dust of the streets, with her hands and knees so thickly calloused from dragging herself around. Imagine her reaching up to pull herself up onto the seat, and then reaching down, lifting first one limp leg onto the tricycle, and then the other leg up and into place, placing her hands on those pedals, and at last moving herself forward. And for the very first time, this woman is mobile. She's off the ground. Her dignity is restored. And there's a smile on her face like no other. And it's that smile and others that I've seen that continue to motivate me to want to do more. I've also had sad times in my travels, as when a scheduled team visit to the governor of Kaduna State ended up being a condolence with losing her husband in a helicopter crash just 2 days before. She kept our appointment and wanted to see us because we were Rotary, and we shed tears together. I witnessed the strength of a mother's love when a Muslim woman quietly allowed me to immunize her child when her husband was not home, but did not mark his finger for fear of being discovered. I remain impacted by the sharp contrast, the renowned beauty of faraway places that I have traveled to, and the images of suffering children. But I've also experienced guilt. Guilt that I am wealthy enough to be among the givers and not the takers. Guilt that, but by the grace of God, I was born in a safe, secure town with great medical care and not in the slums of a forgotten city. Guilt that there have been times when I wished I had more, as I've gazed out upon those who have nothing. But most importantly, I've looked into the eyes of thousands of children, and I understand why it is so crucial for our program to succeed. Good stories do make our history, and it's vital for generations of any age to learn of the disease that has shaped human history for centuries. I urge each of you to get out there, to tell Rotary's story, to be the best Rotary polio advocate you could possibly be. And as the story of polio continues to be written, make sure you are a part of it. Advocacy is so huge, and it would play a huge role in what we are now seeing in New York State. The day that I woke up and heard that there was polio in the United States, I was literally just frozen in time for a few minutes. I could not imagine that it had come back. But of course, it hasn't come back. You see, there's no fear. This is not the wild polio virus, and it's not spreading in the US, and it will not spread into Canada. But it does give us alarm, and it does open the possibility that that could indeed happen. This young man, about 20 years old, in New York, lived in a Jewish community that did not believe in vaccinating, and he was not vaccinated for polio. So he was very vulnerable, as is any child around the globe. Because as long as polio still exists, anywhere, children everywhere are at risk. And I can't imagine for this young man, because I think it's even harder for adults who already knew how to walk and play sports and all of that, and then to suddenly be paralyzed. I can't wrap my head around it, especially because it's such a needless thing to have happened. They are vaccinating in New York, but there's a large percentage that are still unvaccinated. Apparently in this community, there's 44% that have only been immunized, whereas the state and national levels go far higher than that. But at 44, at 20, I cannot imagine how he must feel. So what they've done is you need to realize that everyone that is unvaccinated in the state of New York right now is at high risk. Even people that have immune deficiencies could be at risk. So they're urging everyone to get vaccinations, all newborns, everyone, to have that vaccination to protect themselves. And what some people didn't realize before this happened is that every time there is a case of wild poliovirus detected or case of poliovirus, even if it's vaccine induced, 200 other people around them have been exposed and they are now spreading the disease. And that's what we are seeing in New York as they continue to pick up cases throughout the wastewater treatment throughout New York State. And as people travel, which they certainly do today, that is going to spread. If you have not been vaccinated for polio, if you know individuals that are anti-vaxxers and have never been vaccinated for polio, I urge them to get that today. They are at risk, and they are at much higher risk than you and I, as well as the children. And we will watch what happens in New York quite closely, because we don't want that to spread anywhere else. This is the same thing that has happened in other countries. You notice the cases of vaccine derived. What that means when you say vaccine derived in these cases is that a child has been immunized with the oral vaccine. But in rare cases, when that happens, that will mutate. The vaccine will mutate within the child because it is a live virus. And it will be excreted in their feces, just as poliovirus happens when you get polio. It will also be excreted in the feces. And that's how it carries from one individual to another, through contaminated water, contaminated food, people changing diapers, people not washing their hands. So vaccine derived means that vaccine, the virus that came from that vaccine mutates and it starts to spread. But if everyone is vaccinated in that community, this will not occur. And that's the key element that we have to hold on to, is that every child that's vaccinated will be safe, but every child that's not will end up possibly with a vaccine-derived poliovirus. And we they've always occurred throughout our time, but we track them now more because we're so close to ending polio, the wild poliovirus, that we really want to keep track of what's happening in all the areas. Most of these you will see are coming out of the African continent. And the African continent was declared polio-free of the wild poliovirus not that long ago. Now, you've heard of the wild poliovirus returning to Malawi. That was a case of someone from Pakistan traveling to Africa, taking the vaccine with them, and reaching and finding a child that was not vaccinated. I'm not sure how old that child was, but I'll bet she was a very young child. And now we're seeing that same thing occur in Mozambique. Both of those cases where you're seeing wild poliovirus returning to Africa has been because of a case from Pakistan. They can trace it back directly to Pakistan and practically right to the village where it came from. So we have to always be on guard why we have to vaccinate every child. It's important. And that's what we're seeing in Pakistan now, that there are pockets of places that do not still want to vaccinate their child. And that allows that vaccine, the ones who did get it too, and the wild poliovirus, to circulate. And the more it circulates among the unvaccinated, the more cases we will see. I hope that's understandable to all of you. I think at this point, I would rather, because there's so much going on in the world today with polio, I would rather open it up to Q&A if that's a possibility. Rather than me rambling on, I think it would be more efficient and better if I could just answer some of those questions that you have about polio in your communities today and who's at risk. Can we do that? I think they're asking you to put it in your chat. And the question, oh, there we are.
Hi, Anne-Lee.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. I'm Catherine Hahn. I'm the polio chair for District 6330. So yes, if we have some questions from anyone on the webinar, if you could just enter them in that Q&A panel, and we'll get them to Anne-Lee. We'd also love it if you have plans already in place for World Polio Day, which is October 24th, as you all know. If you want to just put those in the Q&A panel as well, we can share that information with everyone here on the call this afternoon. Anyone have any questions for Anne-Lee? Here we go. Hala says, thank you for all you do. I have a thought to share, please. Go ahead. Make Hala. So at this point, you're going to have to type in your comments, Hala, because it's only Hala that can speak.
I see someone thanking me for my purple pinky.
Yeah.
For those of you who do not understand what the purple pinky is, when we immunize children overseas, we have to mark their left pinky because our campaigns last for a week, and we need to make sure that we don't go back to vaccinate the same child, because we go through the area more than once in order to find out if there's any child without a purple pinky, and then we can reach those missed children.
Great. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us, Annalie. Joanne Clement's question: if you were vaccinated as a child, do you need a vaccination as a senior?
If you received fully the whole series of vaccinations, then you probably do not. However, I have read where as we get older, our immunity wanes. And so if you're ever going to travel anywhere overseas, I would recommend, and so does CDC, that you get a booster. It's very simple. It's painless, really. And it will protect you against whatever you may encounter. If you're in a situation like in New York and someone discovers polio in your area, I would run out and get one in a heartbeat.
Okay, great. Thank you. Colleen McGregor asks, has the COVID virus epidemic changed our polio eradication efforts?
It diverted them for a short while. We were doing both to curtail the spread of COVID. Also, we never lost our focus on polio, and nations were still. For the first couple of months, they stopped, but they continued to talk about staying home, washing your hands, and those same recommendations for COVID helped to stop the spread of polio for a time, which was awesome.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Henning asks, will Rotary International become active to aggressively counter this new resurgence of polio after all this effort was taken? And are their partners on board for this as well?
My answer is yes. They're already aggressively countering this new resurgence of polio. There have been polio campaigns held in both Mozambique and Malawi, and ongoing in other countries where the circulating vaccine derived is happening. So yes, we are on board. Our partners are with us. And our surveillance is far better than it ever was. And back to the COVID question, I have to tell you that the surveillance system is really the key to all of this. It assisted them with COVID, and it is assisting us now finding these cases and continuing to find them.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Henning. Hala just makes a comment. It's not Muslim women. It is a culture. It's the 1% that believe in any kind of probably do not believe in any kind of vaccination. So preferable to say the country, but not the religion. Thanks. Any comment on that?
Yes, I'm sympathetic to what he's saying. And I agree, it is the culture. But in this instance, I'm out in the streets immunizing children, and some women were not allowing me to take their babies. But this particular woman did. And the husbands were not home at the time. And that was the key. So he never knew, and that's okay because that child was protected.
Right.
I'm not anti any of these religions. We've worked with them for years, and you have to be sensitive to what their needs are. But it can be done, and we're winning them over. So,
right. Okay. Great. Thanks, Annie. And then finally, Joan Fisher asks, will you be leading another NID anytime soon?
Not super soon. I had entertained the possibility of doing one late this winter. That's still up in the air. I'm still watching COVID closely, and also watching my own body closely as to whether I'm ready for that just now. But possibly, Joan, very possibly.
Great. Awesome. John Lewis asks, is it true that the polio shot is not a live virus, but the oral vaccine is live, but attenuated, meaning it has some watered down live virus? Therefore, the oral vaccine is the one that has the risk, but probably more acceptable to many populations.
Yes. The injection is not. It's a modified live. It's not a live virus at all. It's your best protection that you can receive. And they have started using that overseas, especially in the routine vaccinations, that they hope every child will get that first. But as regards to the, I don't know if I'd call it watered down, but the oral vaccine, not only is it more acceptable because we've used it for so many years over there, but there's a real reason why we're using that. There's several reasons, in fact. We use the oral vaccine right from the beginning. One, because it's less expensive than the injectable. Two, because it can be given by anyone. I mean, you could give 2 drops in a child's mouth. The next reason is that I'm having brain cramps today. It's really bad. And by the way, the risk is minimal. I have to tell you that the risk is minimal.
Okay.
Those are the two main reasons. Is it's inexpensive. Oh, and the other reason we use it is because when you give the oral vaccine, it reacts the same way as the polio virus. So in order for a child to get polio, it has to enter their mouth. It has to come through the oral digestive system and go down through all that. Like I said, 1 in 200, when that happens, that virus will attack the spinal cord, go into the nervous system, and that child will be paralyzed. So the vaccine itself also goes into the digestive system, and it is excreted in their feces the same way as the polio virus would be. And so the reason we use it is because we can get a weakened immunity to any children that we miss in that village. Not necessarily a strong one, but we can reach more children and be more effective by using that oral vaccine. And that's really the major reason why we do that.
Okay. Great. Thanks, John, for that question. Finally, Tom, is it a challenge getting the vaccinations to those war-torn areas? If so, how is it resolved?
It is a challenge. It would be more of a challenge for you and I, but we use the locals to do that. Even in the areas where the Taliban, they have control, they have been known to take the vaccine in and give it to the children themselves. And so it is always difficult in times of war. But keep in mind, that has happened throughout our time in eradication efforts. There have been wars in many countries in Africa. And there have been times, you may have heard of days of tranquility, when both sides would lay down their weapons and allow one day for workers to go in and reach their children. So it does get resolved eventually. It just is a minor setback. And unfortunately, there probably are more children affected at that time than there would have been.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Tom. And thanks, Anley, for answering those questions. We've had just one person, just Tanya has commented in the chat panel what they're doing for World Polio Day. So that is the Global Passport Club is doing the world's greatest meal, October 15th. To pick up in Sarnia. So if anyone else has some ideas of what they're doing for their World Polio Day celebration, you want to just enter that either in the chat box or in the Q&A. We can share all those informations. It's really amazing how innovative people can be when coming up with ideas for raising money for polio. So, and do you have any thoughts you would like to share about that, Anley, about ideas for raising for polio?
I think there's no limit to your imagination, and you should try very hard to find something that will work for your district or your club. I like Pasta for Polio. I hadn't heard of that one, Tanya. Good on you. We did we planted crocuses here like they did in England last fall. My club was able to arrange for the purchase of these crocuses in advance at a reduced rate. And in the spring, the purple crocuses come up and are a reminder of what we're doing and the number of children that we're reaching. And so I like that idea as well.
Right. Yeah. And in our district, we did tulips for polio. So we had some polio tulips.
Excellent.
That we planted around the district.
And were they purple?
They were not, but they were the color of the End Polio's logo. So they were red and orange and yellow. Beautiful, beautiful tulips.
You know, it works. You don't have to do the same thing.
Yeah. Great. Awesome.
But I just want to remind people how important it is that we do honor this day. It was the day that it honors the birthday of Jonas Salk, number one, who came out with the very first vaccine. But number two, it helps to do that awareness. I mean, awareness is what Rotarians can do best, and advocacy. And I think that the more that our public understands what we're doing in Rotary, the more they will join us and be able to financially support us. It's just so important, and every dollar counts. Even if you take the Purple Pinky program into a school and have the children pay to have their fingers painted, every little bit helps. And don't forget the Gates match. That really helps.
Exactly. All right. Anyone else have any questions for Anley?
I'm sorry I didn't be able to show my photos. I'm sorry I was a little discombobulated. My computer was not acting well.
That's okay. We all know that this is how technology works. But I'm happy that we'll be able to share some of those photos. I said to Anley when I first reached out to her that the first time I saw Anley do a presentation was at the district conference in Frankenmuth. And that deck of photos that she had was life-changing for me. That's actually what got me excited about being able to be a part of the End Polio campaign. So thank you so much for that inspiration, Anley.
Thank you. Can I just leave you with one other story?
Yeah.
Maybe some of you have heard it before, but in addition to Mrs. Woodbury, there was another woman that I met that had a huge impact on me. And it happened several years ago. I met a friend named Carol, and I went to see her because Carol and I had contracted polio at different ages, but in the same year, 1955, during that same outbreak. But we had different results. And she was also in the Boston area, but further away from Boston, west of Boston, where I was north. Just shy of her 6th birthday, on her very first day of school, Carol put her head down on her desk because she had a really bad headache, and her teacher sent her home. But a spinal tap at the hospital, same as I had, tested positive for polio. And her brother and sister also tested positive, as did my 4 siblings. But the only symptoms our siblings experienced was a mild fever. Keep in mind, I said one person paralyzed, 200 more affected. And that's why those are showing positive with no symptoms. For the next 2 years, though, Carol remained in hospitals and rehab centers, and she survived by living in an iron lung. Carol passed away a couple Decembers ago, living much longer than doctors had expected. She had spent the last 66 years of her life flat on her back with brief periods of time on a respirator outside in this iron lung. She could move her left index finger, and she mastered the computer. Someone put the keyboard down and the whatever you do, and she educated herself because she could master that computer. She was a remarkable, remarkable woman. And I cannot say that I didn't, that was one of the most memorable afternoons that I have spent in some time. I want to read a passage to you from a memoir that she wrote. And yes, she wrote many things with that one little index finger until, of course, she learned to speak into the computer, which was even better. Here's a memoir, and I just want to read this to you. In 1956, My Fair Lady was a recent Broadway hit, and one of the women in the ward owned a 45 RPM recording of it, which she played often enough so that Kathy and I learned all the words to the songs. Now, Kathy was the girl in the next iron lung. I wonder if any of the adults hearing us sing, I Could Have Danced All Night, was moved by the poignancy of those words on the lips of 2 little girls who would never again walk, much less dance. And I also want to share one of her poems. Left by my parents in a hospital room in isolation. The dark of their going, the dark of my staying. Weeks isolated from those without the virus. My baby brother learning to take steps. My body learning not to walk. Those words really, really stay with me. Mm-hmm. I have a sign here in my kitchen at home that reads, gratitude turns what we have into enough. And I have to say that I have enough, as I'm sure all of you, if you could relate to that same message, we all have enough. So I'm going to follow up here to make my final statements, unless you have more questions, is that I remain committed to this cause because every step that I take is a reminder why we must eradicate polio. And as post-polio begins to affect my body more and more every year, I am doubly reminded why we must eradicate polio. So remember, every child that you know, every child that you see should be your reminder. And as the creator of the oral polio vaccine, Dr. Albert Sabin indicated, the true luster is to be found not in setting the goal, but in having the courage to take every step to achieve that goal. There is so much that we can do right here from our homes in New England and in Canada. It's that simple. We don't have to travel overseas. We don't have to be on the ground putting the vaccine in the mouths. But we do have to be helped with the funding to get that vaccine delivered to every child. So stay with me. Let's walk these final footsteps together. It's going to take vision, perseverance, and wisdom to cross that finish line. But it's also going to take the heart of a Mrs. Woodbury to be there for that final step. And I think you all have a heart of a Mrs. Woodbury. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Ann Lee. One final question was, if Jonas Salk was born October 28th. Why do we observe on the 24th?
I don't know. I just said it. And I knew you looked that up because I looked it up once too. But that is to honor him. And I don't know why the difference in the date. I can't answer that.
Okay. Mike says it's also United Nations Day on the 24th. So there you go.
Oh, there you go. Maybe that's why.
There you go. I'm going to ask Tanya if you could please unmute yourself.
Hello there. Hi there, Ann Lee.
Sorry, it wasn't so great today.
Hey, that's also all good. Now, you've spoken to us about those who have made an impact on you. Well, you know that you've made an impact on many, many of us. And I've known Ann Lee for about 20 years since I first joined her on an NID to India. That was back in 2003. I think we were 13 years old, weren't we? So since that time, our district has seen Ann Lee visit us to training events, conferences, etc. And however, it's now this new generation of Rotary who you have had a chance to and are impacting, are having a chance to impact and are impacting. There are many of that new generation of Rotary on screen with us here today. Okay. And I'm so happy that they were able to hear from you and have you continue to be an influence in our lives and all of Rotarians in the district and beyond. So thank you once again, and we'll see you soon.
You're very welcome. Would love to see you all in person.
Well, thank you, everyone. As we draw to a close, I'm happy to announce that through our District Rotary Foundation Chair, David Elliott, myself, have come up with the idea of starting a Polio Plus Society in District 6330. That's for individuals that make a minimum contribution to Polio Plus for 100 years until it's deemed eradicated in the world. So join me. I'm going to fill out application number 1 and be the first member of the Polio Plus Society. Information will be on our website. There's a great, nice looking pin and certificate for your recognition. But if we're gonna eradicate polio in our lifetime, everyone's got to step up and be a part of this process. So thank you for your generosity. $330,000 over the last 3 years from this district is outstanding. We can't stop now. It looks like it's reared its ugly head again, and it just doubles down our efforts to make sure that the children of the world are not affected by this devastating disease. And the last thing I will leave you before I'll sign off is we're going to share with you the new Zoom schedule again. We'll leave that up for a while. So if you want to write down some placeholders in your calendar for those, more information on the links and everything will be sent out in just a few weeks. So thank you again, and see you in November for the next one. Bye, everybody.